Please listen to this sad, sad, sad situation. Listen up.
How are you, my friend? Hey, everyone, I'm Allison Morris. It is Monday, December 30th. We have a whole lot to cover. First, brand new details just in about a machete-wielding man who allegedly stabbed several people during a Hanukkah celebration. Coming up, what police found in his car and in the search history on his phone. We also have new information on federal charges against him. Plus, a gunman opens fire at a Texas church, killing 2 people, while armed parishioners are now being called heroes. And an in-depth new report examines President Trump's decision to withhold security aid to Ukraine. Who stood up to the president? Ahead. We are learning more about that gruesome attack at a rabbi's home this weekend in New York. The suspect now facing federal hate crime charges. According to new court documents, 37-year-old Grafton Thomas allegedly burst into the packed home Saturday night during a Hanukkah celebration and started stabbing and slashing people with a machete. 5 people were injured and they suffered slash wounds, a severed finger, even a skull fracture. Thomas allegedly fled while a witness followed him, taking note of the car that he was driving. New York City police officers later stopped that car in Manhattan, where they say that Thomas was found covered in blood with a strong smell of bleach coming from the car. Police say they found the machete and a knife inside the vehicle. Court documents say that officials also found handwritten journals at Thomas's home that contained anti-Semitic writings. Witnesses described the attack as chaotic. They say at least 2 men tried to stop Thomas.
People who are in this house when it happened, they were, pretty much shaken. But at the same time, I think it was quite encouraging to learn 2 things. First of all, that one of the people who was in the house followed the perpetrator when he left and went to his vehicle, and he got a tag. And this is how law enforcement was able to apprehend him within hours, because the information went out pretty quickly.
I saw him walking in by the door. I asked who's coming in the middle of the night with an umbrella. While I was saying that, he pulled it out from the thing and he started to run into the big room, which was on the left side. And I throw him tables and chairs that he should get out of here. And he injured a guy, was a carrier arrest guy. But he was bleeding here, bleeding in his hands all over.
I came back in, grabbed the coffee table that was on the floor, hit him in his face. And that's when he came back outside after me. He told me, "Hey you, I'll get you." And he started walking towards me, and I was going before him like a few feet, screaming, he's coming, everybody in the synagogue should run away. I don't feel like a hero. I feel God is a hero. He sent me in the right place in the right time, and he gave me the right set of mind.
Joining us now, NBC's Kathy Park. She's live in Muncie, New York. And Kathy, a lot of information in that complaint. What more have you learned?
Allison, good afternoon. That is right. A lot of chilling new details. First, I'll talk about a little bit more information about what happened in the rabbi's home. According to the complaint, he said no one is leaving. And then there was a little bit more information about what officials were able to retrieve in the suspect's car, which was found about 30 minutes away from here in Manhattan. They found a machete as well as a knife, and both of those weapons were blood-stained. Also, during the search, when they obtained the search warrant in the suspect's home, originally we were reporting there were no visible signs of anti-Semitism, but after more thorough investigation and after combing through some of his belongings, there was a journal that included anti-Semitic sentiments. There was writing in there, and I'll just quote. It says, "Hebrew Israelites took from the powerful people." A phone was also recovered as well as part of the investigation. And in the internet browser, there were searches like, "Why did Hitler hate the Jews?" So we are still combing through this complaint. We know that the suspect will be appearing in federal court sometime this afternoon. So we should be getting a little bit more information, but this complaint is new. So this is in addition to those state charges for attempted murder, which he has already pleaded not guilty to. So these are additional charges at the federal level. But, overnight we heard from the suspect's family, who had said that Grafton Thomas, the accused in this case, had a long history of mental illness and hospitalization, and harbored no hate toward any religious groups, and grew up in a household that embraced all faiths and all religions. So a lot of developing news, and of course we'll be bringing you up to speed throughout the afternoon. Allison.
All right, Kathy Park in Muncie, New York. Thank you so much. Lawmakers demanding action after Saturday's attack. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York calling for more federal funding to keep synagogues safe. And 4 elected Jewish officials in New York are asking the governor to declare a state of emergency and to deploy the National Guard to patrol Orthodox Jewish neighborhoods. Earlier on MSNBC, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio promised to take action.
The answer to the challenge is to be additionally vigilant, to put more police presence out. We're going to have community safety coalitions, community members of different ethnic backgrounds joining together to patrol streets and to inhibit this kind of violence. And we're focusing on our young people and our schools, adding to our curriculum immediately to teach young people that any act of hate ultimately comes back to hurt everyone.
Let's take a step back. Why is this out there, and why do we allow it to go on? No people group, no matter who they are, should be terrorized by others who simply hate them.
Today it's in every different community, and we're calling out frequently and as aggressively as we can, but I think looking at the laws would be helpful.
And joining us now, David Harris. He's the executive director of the American Jewish Community. David, thank you so much for being with us. I want to run through a couple of statistics here. The Anti-Defamation League says that in New York City, between January and November, anti-Semitic incidents were up 17%. Police saying there have been at least 8 attacks on Jewish people in the area this very month. Are you seeing a rise in anti-Semitism across the country?
Well, absolutely. The American Jewish Committee is tracking this as well, and we're seeing a rise. In fact, we're beginning to call it an epidemic. During the 8 days of Hanukkah, on each of those days, there was at least one anti-Semitic attack, and of course, it culminated in Muncie, New York.
What do you attribute this to? What is going on in our country?
It's hard to pinpoint any one reason, but clearly several things are happening at once. The first is that there is little to no understanding today of the Holocaust. The suspect searches for why Hitler killed the Jews. A basic education would have taught him stay away from that. 6 million people were killed in an act of racism that could apply to any group in the world. Secondly, social media. It's exploded. And anyone who wants to look for conspiracy theories, tropes, all they have to do is go to their laptop and they'll find it in abundance. And thirdly, there's a copycat phenomenon. The more these events happen, the more other people may feel, this is my moment of fame, this is my moment of attention.
Right.
Let me try this as well.
Right.
And that's why a Get Tough policy becomes so important at this moment.
Celebrity
You call
hound.
this an epidemic, and you talked about education or a lack of education. What can we do to fight this and to fix this? Is education a place to start?
Well, it's certainly one place to start. Of course, education is a long-term process, and if events are happening every day, whether in Brooklyn or Manhattan or Rockland County, it's not going to fix the problem overnight, but it's a piece of it. Another piece of it, of course, is increased law enforcement. I want to applaud Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio for the steps they've taken in the last 24 to 36 hours. I want to applaud the federal government for introducing the federal charges as well to escalate this, to send a message. If you want to engage in anti-Semitism, we're going to come down with all the force of law available to us, local, state, and federal.
Some Jewish leaders aren't sure here about what the proper solution is. One rabbi telling NBC News, quote, people are trying to have security without turning synagogues into lockdowns. Is it possible to create safe space in a way that makes worshipers comfortable? You seem like you like the idea of increasing, at least for right now, some of the security and the police presence in areas that have dealt with these kinds of crimes.
Allison, I don't think there's a simple solution.
Okay.
There's going to be a trade-off no matter what. I mean, either we have more security and people are still more concerned. How do I explain to my children and grandchildren why there are armed guards outside their school or their synagogue? On the other hand, if they're not there, then people are exposed. So it's important that we have enhanced security, that it not become so intrusive that people are discouraged from coming, and at the same time the Jews not feel in any way inhibited. Jews need to express pride and courage and backbone right now.
Governor Cuomo called this domestic terrorism. Is that what you see this as? Is that what you want, that we should be calling this?
I think he's right to call it domestic terrorism.
On the money.
I mean, this goes way beyond the things we've seen before. The willful attempt to walk into a room of 100 people celebrating a Hanukkah candle lighting and to stab as many people as he can, what is it?
Yeah.
If it's not domestic terrorism, what can it be called?
David, thank you so much for being with us. We very much appreciate it. I know it's a very tough topic. Appreciate it. Now to another attack on a house of worship. Investigators trying to find the motive behind a deadly shooting that happened live online. The service at West Freeway Church of Christ was being live streamed on YouTube when the shooting started. Moments later, 2 armed parishioners, part of the church's security team, shot that suspect dead. NBC News' Blaine Alexander has more.
The urgent calls came right in the middle of Sunday service.
We're going to need help with patient care.
It happened at West Freeway Church of Christ in White Settlement, Texas. The service was being live streamed on YouTube. There, in the top left corner, you see a man get up from his seat and talk to someone. Minutes later, he steps back, pulls out a shotgun, and fires twice. But within seconds, parishioners, who were also armed, spring into action.
2 of the parishioners who are volunteers from the security force drew their weapons and took out the killer immediately, saving untold number of lives.
In the gunman's path, 2 victims. Both rushed to the hospital where they later died. One of them identified by family as 64-year-old Tony Wallace, a loving husband, father, and grandfather.
He was just our rock. It was just a rock that held us together.
Tony's daughter Tiffany describes watching in horror as the gunman opened fire, shooting her father as he served communion. She says she held him in the sanctuary in what would be his final moments.
You see it on TV, you see it on the news, and once it hits home, it's like you don't think it's gonna hit home. And the fact that
Lord,
it hit our home, and someone that supports us and it loves us, and it's our dad. And that's what hurts the most.
This shooting comes 2 years after another gunman killed 26 people at First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas. Soon after, state lawmakers passed 2 laws, one allowing guns inside churches, the other making it easier for congregations to form security teams.
This church had its own security team. They were well trained. The heroism today is unparalleled.
As yet another Texas church community is grieving, the FBI is joining the investigation, working to learn more about the gunman and why he opened fire.
That was NBC's Blaine Alexander. Now to some other stories that we're following. Iran condemning retaliatory airstrikes by the United States in both Iraq and Syria as acts of terrorism. American fighter jets bombed 5 sites across those 2 nations on Sunday, targeting weapons and munition depots that U.S. officials say were linked to Iran-backed militias. The U.S. says those militias were responsible for rocket attacks against coalition bases, including an attack that killed a U.S. contractor and injured 4 service members in Iraq on Friday. At least 24 people were killed and 50 injured, according to local media quoting the militias. And North Korean leader Kim Jong-un calling for, quote, positive and offensive security measures to protect the regime. Those remarks came during a high-profile government meeting over the weekend. He gave the Trump administration a year-end deadline to offer concessions in exchange for denuclearization talks. Kim Jong-un has previously threatened to resume nuclear and long-range missile testing if the U.S. does not ease sanctions. Coming up, with just 35 days to the Iowa caucuses, presidential candidate Joe Biden getting heat from his opponents and protesters on the campaign trail. But first, some new reporting suggests one Democratic senator may vote against President Trump's impeachment. We'll tell you who next. You're watching MSNBC Live.
Sad. We're living in sad times. Happy New Year to everybody.